Crime can be divided into two main categories, misdemeanors and felonies. A misdemeanor is broadly defined as a crime that is punishable with more than 15 days in prison, but less than 1 year. A felony carries a term of imprisonment for more than 1 year. When a person who commits a misdemeanor or a felony is caught, that person, who is called a defendant or the accused, goes through a legal process that ends with a judge or jury finding him either guilty or innocent. If the person is found guilty, then a judge decides what the punishment should be. Crime can be divided into two main categories, misdemeanors and felonies. A misdemeanor is broadly defined as a crime that is punishable with more than 15 days in prison, but less than 1 year. A felony carries a term of imprisonment for more than 1 year. When a person who commits a misdemeanor or a felony is caught, that person, who is called a defendant or the accused, goes through a legal process that ends with a judge or jury finding him either guilty or innocent. If the person is found guilty, then a judge decides what the punishment should be. Let me begin by talking about types of felonies. Some of the more serious felonies include burglary, robbery, arson, kidnapping, rape, and murder. These crimes are so serious that anyone found guilty will spend some time in prison. A misdemeanor, on the other hand, could be pickpocketing, fare evasion, or something of that nature. But sometimes a crime that is a misdemeanor in one part of the country might be a felony in another part of the country. Another way in which people may classify crime is by using the terms white-collar crime or blue-collar crime. White-collar crime refers to crime committed by salaried employees in businesses and corporations. It includes tax fraud and embezzlement, and it can involve large sums of money and affect millions of people. One of the main types of white-collar crime is corporate crime. Corporate crime is committed by people of high social status who work in corporations. Corporate crime is very difficult to prosecute for two main reasons. First, because it's difficult to prove who's responsible. And second, because the criminals are usually wealthy and powerful. An example of corporate crime that was successfully prosecuted concerns the tobacco industry in the United States. The tobacco industry was found guilty of causing the deaths of thousands of people who smoke cigarettes. As punishment, tobacco companies have had to pay millions of dollars to the victims' families. The crimes you're more than likely to hear about are blue-collar crimes, such as burglary, car theft, pickpocketing, and so on. Perhaps we hear more about these because they happen more often. However, white-collar crime can have a greater impact on our society. Crime has always existed in society, but today there are new kinds of crimes. One example is the use of computers to steal identities. As more people have access to computers, the more likely it is for your identity to be stolen. If this happens, criminals may open several credit card and bank accounts in your name. And of course, they won't pay the bill. So that means your credit will be ruined, and that's very difficult to correct. As long as there has been crime, there have been ways to solve it. One of the oldest methods is interrogation, a method in which the police question people who might have committed the crime or might have information about the crime. Interrogation can help the police to establish many basic facts, but modern techniques for solving crime includes more complex and scientific methods. Let me first talk about a system often called crime hotlines. In some cases where law enforcement personnel have difficulty finding a criminal, they turn to private citizens for help in solving a crime. This system allows people to make a phone call or access to a website and give information to the police anonymously. This can often be effective when people are afraid to give information in public. Sometimes a family member may have committed the crime, and another family member finally decides to call the police and give information they have. Second, fingerprinting. Each person's fingerprint is unique. The ancient Chinese used fingerprints to sign legal papers. What better way to identify an individual? Yet, it was only in the late 19th century that fingerprints were first used to identify criminals. A variety of scientific techniques makes it possible for fingerprints to be lifted from most surfaces. Then they can be compared to the fingerprints the police have on file. A relatively new technique that crime fighters are now using is called psychological profiling. Criminal psychologists look at the crime and the way it was committed. Based on this information, they could try to understand the personality and motivation of the person who committed the crime. Then they can focus their search on people who match that profile. In some cases, private citizens are finding ways to solve crimes as well. With a little knowledge of electronics, anyone can put a hidden camera in a home or an office. In the 1990s, as an example, there were some cases where nannies were accused of abusing the children they were paid to care for. Hidden cameras were used to prove the nanny's guilt. However, the technique is controversial because it involves issues of privacy. Finally, let me discuss DNA. Of the most recent crime-solving techniques used, DNA is proving very effective. Each person, with the exception of identical siblings, has a unique DNA coding system. So, if criminals leave anything that can be tested at the scene of a crime, such as blood or hair, they can be identified. DNA was used to solve a crime for the first time in England in 1987. And since that time, it has become widely used and is considered 99% accurate. DNA testing can also be used to prove a person is innocent. Many prisoners have been released because DNA evidence proves they did not commit the crime of which they were convicted.